Mr. Donziger, thank you so much for being with us here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
How you holding up on your? I've heard that today is your 800th day of house arrest. So you've been on house arrest for 800 days because I mean, for those who are watching are probably familiar with your story, but just a quick background: you were basically attacked for your role in helping win this massive $9.5 billion lawsuit against Chevron for knowingly poisoning indigenous communities in Ecuador. And they came after you, but they came after you in an extra disturbing way. On top of it being disturbing that a corporation came after you like this, they colluded with the New York court system to prosecute you. And that is why you have been on house arrest for 800 days. And then you were recently sentenced to 6 months in prison. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to try to reduce, it's really a 28-year story of an epic litigation, a successful litigation by indigenous peoples against Chevron. I'll just explain it in a minute. I was part of a legal team that won this big case down in Ecuador against Chevron. They wanted the case in Ecuador. They accepted jurisdiction there. Our judgment against them, which was extraordinary, has been affirmed by multiple appellate courts, 28 appellate judges in Ecuador and Canada. Rather than pay the judgment, they came after me, and they've been targeting me for 10 years with the help of a U.S. federal judge, Lou Kaplan, and it's resulted in my detention. The specifics are rather harrowing in this sense. Kaplan charged me with criminal contempt of court after I appealed one of his orders that I'd turn over my computer to Chevron. I believe his order was unlawful. The computer has attorney-client privilege information. I've never heard of such an order. I was very open with him. I said, I can't do this. I'm going to appeal your order. I appealed the order, and while I was appealing his order, he charged me with criminal contempt of court for disobeying his order that I was appealing. Never happened before in U.S. history. He then took his criminal charges, which again I believe are baseless, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution, as you're required to do when you're a judge. U.S. Attorney said, we're not doing the case. They declined the case, obviously because the charges had no basis. Kaplan didn't stop there. He appointed a private law firm named Seward and Kissel to prosecute me in the name of the public. So I'm being prosecuted not by the government, but by a private law firm. When he did this, Judge Kaplan hid the fact that Seward and Kissel had Chevron as a client. So I'm essentially being prosecuted by Chevron without a jury by a woman named Rita Glavin, who was a partner in the Chevron law firm, and who is representing Chevron's interests, not the public's. The public didn't want to prosecute me, much less lock me up. I'll add that the longest sentence ever given a lawyer who's been convicted of what I'm charged with is 90 days of home confinement. And I've now served literally 800 days of home confinement, more than 8 times that amount. And on top of that, the judge, who has financial ties to Chevron, not Kaplan, but someone he appointed, Loretta Preska, just sentenced me to 6 months in prison on top of my 800 days of house arrest. We're appealing all of this. And if the court system works as it's supposed to, I expect to be fully exonerated. But she's now trying to force me to serve this entire prison sentence before the appeal can be heard and before the case can be resolved by the appellate court. And finally, I'll add this. 2 weeks ago, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, 5 esteemed international jurists, ruled that my entire detention constitutes illegal deprivation of liberty, is arbitrary, violates the UN Declaration on Human Rights, violates the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, basically violates multiple provisions of international law. This is an outrage. It has virtually destroyed my ability to function as a lawyer and as a professional. It's caused enormous stress for me and my family, including my wife and son. I've just spent my 3rd straight birthday under house arrest, and I'm a lawyer who won a case. I call on Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Merrick Garland, Congress to do something about this. You simply cannot have a country that supposedly respects the rule of law lock up its lawyers, lock up its successful human rights lawyers. Obviously, if this were happening in another country that was unfriendly to the United States, the Biden administration would be the first to condemn it. Well, it's happening right here in the United States, and they need to do something about this outrageous violation of international law and domestic law. So yeah, that's I guess that took a little longer than a minute, but that's the story.
No, but such a shocking story, and I know you've had to tell it over and over again, and that's probably getting a little annoying having to repeat it, but it's so important. And I say that to note that there's been an unofficial media blackout on your story. And I interviewed you a few months back before these new developments, and we talked about this. You told me that the New York Times is like a 30-minute walk from your house, and they have never once come to you and interviewed you about what's happening in their own backyard. Meanwhile, they cover this stuff around the world all the time. And I think I saw Katie Halper tweet out a video of like somebody on MSNBC sneaking in. I think it was like an academic on the issues of like fossil fuel poisoning. And she like snuck in your name on MSNBC. And that was the only time they've ever said your name. And then I know there's been people like Susan Sarandon and Roger Waters who are excellent and have been trying to get as much attention possible for your case, which is great. But at the same time, you have these really like celebrity progressives and these kinds of, the squad members like not coming and showing any solidarity or giving their voice to it. I mean, what's going on here? Why is the media completely ignoring this case? And why are politicians completely ignoring this case, in your opinion?
Well, Chevron and the fossil fuel industry have a lot of power, and what the people of Ecuador have done with the help of their lawyers like me is very threatening. And they want to try to silence us and ignore the story. I mean, I will say that independent journalists like The Nation, The Intercept, Chris Hedges, you, Katie, Michael Moore, I was just on his podcast, have been fabulous. I mean, the stories have really captured the horror of what's happening, not only to me, but what this means for the United States, in terms of advocacy, in terms of free speech, in terms of our democracy. So, the media has been good, but the big media has completely ignored the story covered by a single network. CNN has been silent, MSNBC silent, CBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, all silent. Several reporters from these outlets have contacted me and interviewed me, and then their stories just get killed. They can't get them on air or in the newspaper. I'm particularly upset with the New York Times. I know a lot of reporters there, and a lot of people want to do it. And there's some, institutional decision simply to ignore this story, hoping it goes away. New York Times is hopelessly conflicted. I mean, Chevron's one of the biggest clients of their ad agency, T-Brand. They also use the Gibson Dunn law firm, which is the same Chevron law firm that's been attacking me and responsible for locking me up. They work for the New York Times at the highest level, dealing with lawsuits related to First Amendment issues. So the New York Times is conflicted. Dean Baquette, the executive editor, I've called on him to deal with this, as has Chris Hedges, nothing but silence. And it's frankly embarrassing for the New York Times because the story is out there. I mean, the facts are out there due to the courage of many journalists, including yourself, Rania. So I think eventually the New York Times, just to protect its own credibility, is going to have to write something about this.
Eventually. Steven, I wanted to ask you, I think, obviously what you're going through is horrible for you and your family. I really don't know how you've kept your sanity. I think I would have lost mine had I been in the same position as you. And all of our solidarity is with you on what you're dealing with. But also, I think that this also goes beyond you in a way, because what's happening to you, what's being done to you, I think is a bigger threat than we realize. So can you explain what the sort of broader threat is here when we're talking about the persecution of a human rights lawyer such as yourself? What does that mean going forward that this was allowed to happen?
Well, I want people to pay close attention because your question is critically important. This is a playbook. This isn't happenstance. It's not the mistake of a judge. It's not an overreach by a corporation. It is actually a playbook that has been used in other countries against other activists, and will be used again in this country against lawyers and activists who are a little too successful in holding the fossil fuel industry accountable. This is a fossil fuel industry playbook designed to silence activism and intimidate people into not doing the frontline legal work and campaigning work needed to protect our planet and to hold major polluters accountable. I mean, think about this. Texaco, now Chevron, went into the Amazon of Ecuador and made a conscious decision to dump billions of gallons of cancer-causing oil waste onto indigenous ancestral lands. Thousands of people have died. That was a money saving, I should say, decision. It was based out of pure greed, and it led to enormous profits for Texaco and its shareholders for many years at the expense of these vulnerable communities. Well, we came in as lawyers and tried to realign that awful situation and force Chevron to pay the people it poisoned. We won the case, and rather than pay the judgment, they've literally spent $3 billion to pay 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers to attack me and other lawyers. You know, it's a playbook designed to intimidate those of us who do this work. It's designed to intimidate indigenous peoples who are the frontline defenders of the planet. And, you know, to some degree, it's already being used against protesters at Standing Rock, at Line 3, and so many other places around the country, primarily Native Americans, primarily indigenous peoples and their allies, many of whom, like Jessica Resniak, are locked up for years for engaging in civil disobedience at pipeline sites. You know, so this is not new, but what's never been seen before is this idea of a corporate prosecution, that is a Chevron-driven private prosecutor who managed to lock me up for 800 days. I never got a jury. I'm charged with a crime that was rejected by the regular prosecutor. This is, in my opinion, a manufactured case designed to intimidate. And by the way, I mean, no disrespect to our friends in other countries around the world, but you see this in other countries. I mean, you know, Russia does this, China does this. Turkey under Erdogan does this. I mean, you know this. You come from, you know, a part of the world where authoritarian leaders and autocratic leaders use their laws and their judicial systems as weapons of violence to target their political opponents. And, you know, how it's much easier, rather than just kill someone, just put them in jail, create a legal case, and make it look like it's the law that's doing the dirty work. But these cases, most of these cases are manufactured, they're fake, and people need to pay close attention to the weaponization of the legal system to target dissidents and to target political opponents of governments, or in this case, a corporation.
Stephen, where can people support your case? Where can people support you?
Thank you. We have a website called freedonziger.com. Free Donziger is one word, Donziger. There's a lot of materials on the website, articles, and there's a legal defense fund donate button. We're constantly raising money. It costs an enormous amount of resources to defend me and others against this monster polluter. So if you can help on that front, please do. But even if you can't, come sign the petition, join our campaign. You'll get regular case updates. And what I would say is just spread the word. I mean, talk about Steven Donziger wherever you are. I mean, we had a rally on the 700th day of my house arrest 100 days ago. God, it's unbelievable how long this has gone on. But it was a global rally in 18 cities around the world, you know. So go to the website and just join what we're doing. This goes way beyond me. You know, there's a lot of people suffering in America, as you all know, and a lot of, you know, the criminal justice system in our country has enormous problems. And I don't want to act like I've like this problem worse than others, because in many respects I don't. I'm at least home. But this is different. This is a fake case targeting a lawyer who's a frontline defender of the earth. And he's being prosecuted directly by an oil company that has captured the public machinery of our prosecutorial apparatus. That has never been seen before. That is scary, and we must not let them get away with it. So please pay attention and go to our website called freedonziger.com. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share my views with you.
No, we really appreciate you. Thanks for giving us some of your time and joining us. I mean, it's scary and shameful. Really appreciate it. freedonziger.com. Everyone go check that out. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. We'll be in touch. Appreciate it.